Welcome to The Weekly Trend, a podcast for navigating the markets through the lens of technical analysis. The Weekly Trend podcast is provided for educational purposes only and does not constitute any professional advice. Listeners should not act upon the information or content without first seeking advice from a registered financial planner.
Welcome back to the Weekly Trend podcast. Today is June 28th, 2024. S&P 500 sitting at as of this morning, yet another all-time high. We're above 5,500. So 5,508 on the S&P. How about that?
Yeah.
Another
highs, right?
all-time high. Some would say it's just trends being trends. Breadth really hasn't fixed itself. We were chatting on here before we got on, Kevin, and obviously here's some of the stats here in a minute. But yeah, another all-time high, and it has continued to be still a mega cap and large cap tech. I mean, to your point, more like 10 names.
Yeah. He was looking at some of like the contribution rates for the return of the S&P over like the last month and 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So over the last month, basically, Apple, NVIDIA, and Microsoft has made up, 50% of that return in the S&P. And really, if you keep kind of going down the list, like kind of like the top 10 on there, it's basically, Amazon, Broadcom, Meta, Lilly's in there, which is kind of an outlier, I guess. Lilly's usually pretty strong. And then Tesla and Google. It's kind of all those names have essentially made up like around 85% of the past month's return in the S&P. And it's even more narrow if you look at the last 3 months. So NVIDIA, Apple, and Microsoft made up 73% of that return. And if you kind of go through roughly that same list, like Google, Amazon, Broadcom, Lilly, Tesla, even kind of Costco works in there, those names actually make up over 100% of that contribution. So really, the remaining 490 some stocks have either kind of, has been roughly around flat or actually detracted from the S&P return. So even kind of paints a much more, narrower picture, or really just kind of the participation within the S&P.
I'm big 2023 vibes.
Sure.
Golly. Yeah, and and it doesn't take a genius to pull up a chart of, pull up all four major indices, S&P, NASDAQ, Russell, Dow, and proof is right there. Russell still sitting, if you look at IWM, still sitting at 203, where we were at Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So, nothing, barely really even positive on the year, maybe up a percent or two.
Right.
But yeah, pretty tough. And Dow, which actually was, hadn't really had some strength there earlier in the year. But, with the growth versus value relationship, flipping back to growth. Yeah, the Dow.
Yeah, like industrials in general in the beginning of the year, like aerospace and defense pretty strong, which is definitely helping out. You had like a lot of your industrial machinery names and things like that, like in your areas of marine shipping that fall in there. Really, as far as like relative participation is concerned, the only things kind of left there are aerospace and defense for the most part. And that, we're using something like PPA, which is a little bit kind of more along the, more in terms of, I guess, more equally weighted for aerospace and defense, just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, it's a good consolidation there.
For sure. So, it's hanging in there, but, a lot of those industrial machinery names and
if you spent the last month consolidating that, you've just gotten crushed on a relative basis, exactly. Even if it's a healthy consolidation.
For sure.
But yeah, in our thing, we do have communication services are back above a relative 200-day.
Yep.
So we do have two sectors again, comm services and tech. But
even there, you're XLC, I guess, is somewhat just keeping pace with the S&P.
Yes.
And I mean, really, if you had to pick between the two, you're still,
It's
probably
tech,
just looking
yeah.
back, right? For
It's
sure.
tech, and then you've had areas, we had these little pops last week where we did see industrials and materials, financials really had, on a relative basis, had a pretty good week last week. And then have given it all back
Yeah, just been
this
hold it.
week. I mean, and you've got materials down to year-to-date relative lows, staples year-to-date relative lows, which is, fine. I don't think anyone's
Right, worried about
upset
that.
that they can't get overweight staples.
Mhm.
But yeah, again, industrials, they're outperforming today, but just not really able to get anything going. And
Yeah,
that's,
I guess.
that's when industrials that look good, they look good on an absolute basis, kind of like PPA.
But that's the thing. I mean, if you're, managing funds against any type of benchmark, depending on what that is, I mean, you're not staying in the game. You're just kind of digging a hole,
You do.
or at least not getting ahead, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean,
yesterday,
Go ahead.
yesterday I was taking kind of a dig through a lot of the, like ETFs within a lot of like every sector, like more of your, I guess, like industry or thematic funds.
Mhm.
I mean, kind of using like some of the relative filters that we have. There were no funds popping up, like you talked about staples. Healthcare didn't have any that met that criteria. Energy was 0. Real estate. Well, industrials only had 3 funds. I think financials maybe had around, 10 funds out of that universe that kind of met that criteria. And really that was mostly, like kind of blockchain, like fintech related.
Fintechy stuff, okay.
Right. So, I mean, it's
I
pretty,
think regionals, they're at, well, they're bouncing here a little bit on a relative basis,
Right.
but pretty awful.
even, I think insurance, kind of for the most part, is kind of slowed down a little bit too.
It has.
Actually, Progressive has a really nice consolidation right now.
I mean, and a few things in financials, in the major banks look fine,
Mhm.
and a lot of the investment kind of broker, Schwab, Jefferies, Oppenheimer, Stifel, they look okay. But yeah, to your point, I mean, even the insurance stuff is falling off.
Yeah. So really, I mean, it's a couple weeks ago when I was on here. I mean, it's still kind of the same picture. I mean, you either have to be tilted towards the S&P, or you really got to be more heavy into like tech, or even just more specifically, I guess, right? Like kind of semiconductors or your mega cap tech.
What about the crypto? Can we own crypto?
Not really the coins, I don't think necessarily.
Yeah, Bitcoin's losing a relative 200 day.
No, Ethereum doesn't look much better. I think it's still kind of, that environment where, maybe like your miners or like your kind of blockchain tech companies are, leading the coins themselves. I mean, if you're going to participate, you kind of got to be tilted to that side of our industry.
You're like DAP. I mean, DAP is, it's been sideways for a couple weeks, but when in Bitcoin started selling off. It's kind of had its last trip up to 71,000. So that was early June. So essentially over the last, we'll call it 3 weeks, Bitcoin's gone from 71 to 60. And to your point, Kevin, DAP, which holds the crypto companies, right? So kind of like gold miners for gold, they're up 20% this month. Is that right? I mean, from June 5th, not about 10%, 11%, 20% at the highs, I guess. But that's certainly an interesting divergence. It's pretty high beta area that you would normally, and if cryptos get hit, those things definitely get hit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is.
Yeah, but then again, like even those miners really aren't necessarily keeping up with the S&P anymore, at least here on a short-term basis.
You got to go up, and you got to go up every day. or you just end up losing so much relative ground.
Yeah, it's like WGMI, like to the S&P, kind of getting turned back here at relative resistance. So, yeah, I guess we'll see.
We'll see. It continues to be. That's where the momentum is at. It is in large cap growth. And I think, speaking of momentum, that's a great segue to highlight our biggest supporter of this podcast, which is the Adaptive Select ETF, listed on the New York Stock Exchange under ticker ADPV. Helps investors access the two most prevalent factors in markets, momentum and relative strength, through a proprietary identification method. The Adaptive Select ETF attempts to own the strongest 25 large cap stocks when the market is in an uptrend. And since not all market environments are the same, Adaptive Select also seeks to prevent extended declines by moving to short-term treasury bills and cash during long-term market downtrends. Investors can find out more, including how to invest in ADPV, by visiting adpvetf.com or calling 1-833-880-5200. Anything else you would like to leave our listeners with? Any crystal ball that says next week we're going to have a different message other than large cap tax?
Sure. At least now it's not really looking at it, right?
Hey, you were on here 2 weeks ago, and I mean, we might have been able to just copy and paste that podcast to this.
For sure.
Because market's up, and under the surface, it's gotten worse. But hey,
Sure.
'Tis the hand we are dealt.
Yeah, and I think the only thing we talked about the last time I was on here is that maybe the yen was going to find a floor, but it doesn't look like that happened either. So
That has not.
JPY USD still sliding down the slope.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to be one of the strongest downtrends out there from any, not just currencies, but any asset class. It's a tough one. And dollar index hanging out above 104. So a little bit of a divergence there. Dollar and rates spent most of the year moving in the same direction, very correlated. But over the last month, we've seen the dollar rebound, and rates have continued to slide off a little bit. Up today. Bonds getting hit today.
Yeah,
So
say bonds getting hit today. So
tough. Definitely
It is.
still in a downtrend. Still a rising right environment.
yeah, your metals, miners, things like that really,
Oh, yeah.
kind of still sliding off. Really the only thing, I guess, really in that space, kind of like your steel names, kind of interesting the last couple days.
Yeah, they've had a
I
nice
guess more,
bounce.
more big picture still, not necessarily a great look, but, kind of over the really short term, kind of an interesting look there. So that might be one to watch. RSI kind of turning back around too.
Oh, I'll be
Oh.
watching now that you've put it on my radar.
There you go. There it is. Put it on the watch list.
All right, sir. Anything else?
No, I mean, unless somebody knows how to get my lovely 8-month-old son to stop getting me sick all the time, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Other than that, I got nothing.
The baby germ will get you.
Mm-hmm. Give me every time. I think I've been sick every month this year so far.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of a rite of passage. Your
Kinda
first
so you can
kid.
just earn your
Yeah.
stripes, basically.
Yeah. I'm glad you're wearing the badge proudly.
Somebody's got to do it.
Well, have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Have a good one.